Hey guys, welcome to Coding Shooting with NJ. Today we are going to learn how can we improve response time of our website by storing database responses in Redis cache. I have already done a video about how to install Redis on Windows and integrate it with PHP. If you haven't watched this video, I would highly recommend you to go and watch this video first, especially if you are new to Redis. I will put the link in the description down below as well. Now let's discuss what we are going to do in this video. At first, we are going to learn about the Redis commands that we are going to use for caching. That includes storing and extracting data from the Redis. Then we'll develop a simple program that connects to the database, runs a query against it, and displays the result. We will also see how much time it takes to fulfill this task. And finally, we are going to stitch the Redis related statements so that the database query results are stored in the Redis cache for subsequent uses. We will compare the time taken by the responses coming from the database with the time taken while accessing same data from the cache as well. Finally, we are going to tackle the issue of stale data in the cache. So let's get going. This is where we left off our first video. This simple program does nothing but create an object of type Redis client, and through that object we are sending the ping command to the Redis server and displaying its output. To create an instance of Redis client, we have installed a library called Predis using Composer. Now for this tutorial, let me remove this ping statement. We don't need this anymore. Okay, now as we just discussed, the first thing that we need to do is learn about the Redis statements needed to store and retrieve data from the Redis. Basically, Redis is a key value pair database. Everything you store in the Redis has to be in the form of key value, where value is the data that you want to store and key is its unique identity in the Redis. You can also think of key value pair as a fancy way of saying variable name and its value. A value can be as simple as a string such as first name or some numeric value such as 35. It could also be as complex as a list, set, hash set, stream, etc. To store a key value pair in the Redis, you need a command beginning with keyword Redis followed by key, which is followed by its value. Let's put this to test and create a key value pair in Redis through our PHP program. To set a key value pair, we need to call a function named set on our Redis object. Now this set function is going to require two parameters. The first one is going to be the name of the key and the second one is going to be its value. So the name that we are going to give this key is name as well, and the value that we are going to give is John Doe. This is going to set a key value pair in the Redis. Now to extract that value associated with this key, we need to call another function called get. And we have to provide the name of the key, which is name in our case. And since we want it to be displayed on browser, so we have to append echo in front of it. Now let's check it in the browser. Our server is already running on localhost with port 8080, so let's go there. And you can see the value John Doe associated with the key name displayed over here. So that means our PHP program is able to set a key in the Redis database and extract that value as well. Now we have covered all the basics. Let's move on to using Redis as a cache for database query responses. For the database, I am using Sakila, which comes pre-packaged with Mysql 8 community version. And the table that I am going to use is called actor. This table is a built-in table and populated with data as well. It has 4 columns: actor ID, first name, and last updated. We are going to query this table through our PHP program, and then the response that we get, we are going to save that data in the Redis cache. Let me remove these 2 lines. So we are going to assume that we have a key named actor in the Redis cache, and that key is holding all the data from the actor table. So the overall structure of this program is going to be as follows. First of all, we will try to get that key from the Redis cache. If there is any such key in the Redis, we are going to display the value associated with that key in our browser. And if no such key exists, that means so far we haven't cached that data in the Redis. So now we need to do 2 things. First of all, connect with the database and extract that data from the database, and then not only display it on the browser, but also store the database response as a key value pair in the Redis. So let's try to get that key from the Redis cache first. And we are assuming that the key is called actor as well. So far this key doesn't exist yet. Now we want the result of this get function to be stored in a variable. We are calling it cached entry. So now we are going to check if this cached entry variable is empty or not. So if this cached entry is not empty, then display the result from the cache, because we have already saved the database response in the cache. And if it doesn't exist, in that case, connect with database, get data, display it, and cache it in the Redis as well. Okay, so let's work on the part which will be executed if we already have a cached entry. The first message that we want to display is we want to inform the user that the data being displayed is from the cache rather than the database, from Redis cache. Now we simply display whatever is stored in the cached entry variable. And we know that cached entry contains the value associated with the key named actor. Then we want to exit the program. If the cached entry variable is empty, in that case, first of all, we have to connect with the database first. I'm going to use MySQLi to connect with the database. Now this constructor requires 4 parameters. First one is going to be the server where our database is running, which is localhost, and port is 3306, the default port for the database. Then we need username, which is root in my case, password, again root. Now we need the name of the database, which is Sakila. In order to keep the program simple and focus on the purpose of this tutorial, I'm not going to code basic checks such that if the connection was established successfully or not. So I'm assuming it is established successfully, and moving on to my SQL statement. Again, to keep it simple, I'm not going to take any data from the user. Otherwise, I have to use prepared statement, and that is going to again extend the program. So I'm going to use select first name and last name from actor table. Let's execute this statement by calling query function and passing this SQL statement as parameter. Now this is going to give us result, which I am storing the variable named result. Since we know that the actor table is populated with data, so that means this result variable is going to have data after the execution of this query method. So now let's move on to displaying this data. And since we are displaying this data from the database, so let's print this message for the user. And to display all the rows one by one, we have to use while loop. This fetch assoc function is going to take one row at a time from the result object, convert it into an associative array, and return that array, which we are going to store in another object called row. And we are saying as long as this row array has data, this is what should happen. And we simply want to print first name and last name. And we want each of them to be printed on separate rows. therefore br. Now since these two statements are only displaying the result in the browser, but we want these values to be stored in the Redis cache as well. So for that we are creating a temporary variable outside the while loop and initialize it with empty string. And within this while loop we have to keep on appending all the data. So we want each actor's first name first, then we want some space, then last name, and in the end we want to be moved on to next line. So therefore HTML element line break. Once we get out of this while loop, our temp variable has been populated with all the rows that have been received from the database. So now we can use the temp variable as a value for our key named actor and store it in Redis. The name of the key we have chosen to be actor, and its value we are going to get from the temp variable. This is going to create a key named actor in the Redis database and stores all the data in the temp variable as its value. And let's exit the program. Now let's go and refresh the browser. But first let me put a line break with each message telling us if the data is coming from the database or the Redis cache, so that the data is displayed underneath these messages. Okay, now let's refresh it. Now you can see all the data, but if you look at this message, it says from database. So that means this data has actually been extracted from database and displayed. But if I refresh this again, next time it's going to show the same data, but first name and last name are going to be displayed on same row, and the message is going to say from the cache. Because when the data was extracted from the database at the same time, we stored the same data in the Redis cache as well. So next time if we request the same data, it's going to come from the cache instead of the database. So now you can see it says from Redis cache. So now if we keep refreshing it, it's going to come from the Redis cache. Unless we erase all the entries from the Redis cache, then if we refresh it, it's going to get the data from the database. So let me do that. Let me open Redis client. Let's first check the keys that currently our Redis cache has. For that, the command is keys followed by asterisk. So it's going to display all the keys. So currently we only have two keys. The first one is the name, which stores the value John Doe that we created a while ago, and the second one is the actor that we just created. So if we delete all the keys with the command flush all and check the keys again, we don't have any more keys. Now if we refresh this again, this time we are going to get the message from the database because the cache has been erased. There is nothing in the cache. Let me refresh it. Now as you can see, it says from database. Now along with displaying this data, a cache entry has been created in the Redis cache as well with the same data. So if I refresh this again, I'm going to get the message from the Redis cache. And if we check the Redis cache again, now we have only one key with the name actor and it contains all the data. That we have stored. So this Penelope Guinness and this line break that we are also inserting from the PHP program and the rest of the data. Now the next thing that we need to handle is the issue of stale data. If we extract any data from the database, store it in the Redis, it's going to be available in the Redis cache unless we explicitly delete it. But sometimes our database data gets updated. In that case, the cache is unaware of any changes made in the database. So in that case, the data present in the cache has turned stale. It's no longer up-to-date data. So we have to make sure that we don't end up with stale data in the Redis cache, or any cache for that matter. Therefore, we have to set a kind of timer with the data that we are storing in the Redis cache. Once that timer expires, we want the cache to be erased as well. So to set this timer or expiry date, we have to use a command called expire. So right underneath where we are setting the key value pair, we have to call another method called expire. This expire method takes two parameters. The first one is going to be the name of the key that we want to be expired after a certain time, and second is going to be the time. So the key that we want to be expired is actor, and we want it to be expired after 10 seconds. Now let's go and check our program in the browser. If I keep refreshing it, it's always going to say from Redis cache. This is because each time I'm refreshing it, our program is checking if we already have a key available, and if it's available, it's simply displaying the message. It's never entering into this else part in which we have a new statement which is setting the expiry date. So what we need to do is that we have to flush the Redis cache first and then execute this program. In that way, when the program executes, it won't find any key with the name actor in the cache. So it will enter into this else part, and when it sets this key value pair, it's also going to set the expiry time as well. So let's go to command line. Now let's flush all. Let's check if we have any keys. We don't have any more keys. Now let's go and refresh the program. Refresh it. Now it says from database. Now if I refresh it, it says from Redis cache. If I keep refreshing it, it will keep on saying Redis cache unless 10 seconds have passed and we get the message from database. Refresh from the cache, and after 10 seconds we again get the message from database. This way we have made sure that our data in the cache is not stale and it's up to date. Now the last issue that we need to handle is that we have to compare the timings. For that, I'm creating two variables at the very top, t0, and assigning it value 0, and another variable t1 and also initializing it the value 0. Now if we get a cache entry in the Redis cache, in that case we are going to get the response from this part. So this is the statement which is going to get data from the Redis cache and display it in the browser. So that means we have to check the current time and store it in t0, and the PHP function to get the current time is micro time, and passing true to this function is going to return us a value in floating point. If you don't set this to true, we are going to get the time in string format. Since this micro time returns us time in microseconds, we want to convert it into milliseconds, so we have to multiply it by 1000. Copy, and second one is going to be t1. Underneath this statement we have to print another statement which simply displays time taken. T1 minus T0, and we want it to be returned it as a rounded off value up to 4 digits after decimal point. Now we need to do the same thing for our else part as well. So if we don't have data in the Redis cache, first of all we need to be connected with the database, then get the data from there. So that means we need to put T0 over here, copy and put it over here, and these two lines let me copy and put it outside the body of this while loop. So this is the time it takes to get the data from the database. Now let's check. So let me refresh it. It says from database, and the time taken is 26.8 something milliseconds. Let's refresh. Okay, from database again, let me refresh now. From Redis cache, and the time taken is 0.0012. So you can already see the amount of time taken by the Redis is much lower than the time taken when extracting the data from the database. The data in the table is just few rows, so you can imagine in large organization with huge database tables, and if our query is even more complicated with multiple joins, so you can already see the amount of time it's going to take. And once we get the result, we can store this in the Redis cache, and that way on our subsequent request for the same data, our response time is going to be much better than the first one. So this is the end of our today's tutorial. I hope you liked it. Thanks a lot.